All right, welcome everyone. Sunday Speedrunner Spotlight, Saturday today, as of live stream, of course, because I can never seem to quite hit the day, but it's fine. What
One
matters
day.
is, yeah, what matters is it goes up on YouTube at the scheduled time. So we're good. It's all fine. But yeah, anyway, welcome LRock to the show. Hello.
Howdy, thanks for having me, Ace.
Yeah, thanks for coming in on very short notice this time. Had
Yeah, I
such
think we materialized this like 15 hours ago. It was a
some
scramble for sure.
sometimes it's hard to find people, so
I'm
you get
glad we get it worked out. I
yeah,
really wanted to do this.
gotta love those miracles that happen to line up. So here we are. So yeah, you know, tell us about yourself and your history with speedrunning as the show entails. So
Well,
start at
as
the
Ace
beginning.
said, I am LRock617, primarily a retro speedrunner. I did my first recorded speedrun in 2016. I first became familiar with speedrunning 2 years before that. 2014, I think, was like a landmark year for when a lot of people just got into speedrunning. And the run that did it was, as most people would probably predict, Sinister One's blindfolded MTPO run, which was awesome because first it introduced me to the concept of speedrunning, even though it didn't technically do it as a speedrun. Like, no disrespect. It's just that, in a GDQ environment like what that was, those runs aren't done for optimization. They're done as a showcase, and that's actually what I appreciate about it more. It's not like watching someone stream and having them like grind out reset attempts and things like that, but it showed me the exhibitionism of what goes into a speed run and the showmanship, and I was really attracted to that. So I kind of just watched them for a couple years. I wasn't really in a spot to start running and streaming myself until a friend of mine back here in my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, got me to do it on his stream, and I just started setting some times on some of my own games that way. Not games that other people would see from too many other streamers. I was primarily a SNES speedrunner. Games I was running included Simpsons Bart's Nightmare, Batman Returns, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, a couple others I can't remember, but those were the three in my first big year. And I spent the next 6 months or so just putting those together before my first actual stream in December 2016. And that's when I like really hit the ground running with it. That's when I was like, hey, I can set up live splits. Hey, I can try to set good times. Hey, I can get a world record in this game. And I managed to do a lot of that. And it's just been that ever since. And it's even past that. My first GDQ was AGDQ 2017, and that opened me up to the community, which I think was the even more inviting part of it, was just getting to know the people that were doing what I was doing, even if they weren't playing the same games. The colloquialism and the lingo, like it all just interspersed, and that's what kept me coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Was the people who do it just like I do.
Yeah,
So
uh,
that's my start.
yeah. I think that's a common thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
once you go to a GDQ, your eyes are opened forever as a
Mm-hmm.
speedrunner, pretty much.
Yeah, and of course you get to see. I guess the term is like you'll get to meet your heroes in real life. You get to see all these people that you only get to watch and realize they're people just like you, and it's wonderful. It was great. Now, as time went on, I spent primarily the next 3 years focusing on speed running. But about 4 years ago, when the world ended, I suddenly live events weren't a thing anymore, and I kind of shifted my focus away from that. I only casually did speed runs from there, but my primary focus from there became arcade runs. I was primarily doing what's called one credit clears of arcade games, where essentially you just beat an arcade game on one quarter. And I kind of just built a chart of those. I'm up to over 200 at this point, and that's been my primary focus on my stream ever since. So I still do speed runs. I still attend big events. I still submit for big events. I still make sure I'm in line with the community, but it was kind of cool to be able to like branch off and do my own thing while still being integral to what was going on with that.
Mm-hmm. And it is a
And
cool,
that's kind of where I'm
unique
at now.
thing because you
Mhm.
can speedrun arcade games,
Yeah,
and
so they can.
you, sometimes you don't like think about that because they're obviously meant to be like quarter munchers. The whole
Right.
point is like it's just amazing if you can beat it at all. So, and
There
usually
was
they're like beat 'em ups or something you wouldn't like
right.
consider a speedrun kind of game.
And that genre is primarily what I focus on. I'll get to that in a moment. But to add on to what you said, uh, when I um, when I saw Grand Pooh Bear last month at Speedrun Sessions in Boston for PAX East, he straight up said, it might be a thing that arcade runs are primarily the most challenging because there's always money on the line. I was like, man, I never thought to think of that, and that's absolutely true. Like, you put in your quarter, suddenly, like, yeah, you are now in a gamble. Like, can you beat this game on what you put in there? Because they're gonna do their darndest to get more money out of you. And I thought that was a cool way to look at it. But as Ace said, my primary focus on speedrunning was on a genre that's not really well known for getting a lot of speedrun attention. That's beat 'em ups, brawlers, we want to call them, primarily belt scrollers. So stuff where you can move up and down, like TMNT, Final Fight, Simpsons Arcade, games like that. And those are, it's always interesting to talk to people who primarily speedrun platformers, and I'll never object that those are like, you know, that's the primary speedrun genre, because there's just so much you can do. There's glitches, there's tricks, there's, don't need to tell you this, you're one of the best SMB speedrunners. So but it was cool to me to be able to dissect games like that and learn how to go faster. Of course, in most of them it just comes down to like, hey, how fast can I clear the screen of enemies? Figure out despawn rates, things like that. And I mean, in platformers, you don't really have to despawn. You just run past enemies, you know, like that's how you despawn. You just keep going. Whereas in a beat 'em up, it's like, well, can I glitch this enemy out by going all the way to the side of the screen? Or do I have to throw them off screen into a black hole, essential black hole where they just don't come back? And those do exist in a number of games. I always thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, every genre has its own unique twist that can make it interesting in some way. Most of the time, at least. But
yeah, and some really push the limits. Stuff like River City Ransom for the NES, like that speedrun is incredibly fast because it's very movement heavy. You can just run through every single screen that doesn't have a boss. It has an overpowered weapon that you have to buy. It's legitimately one of the best beat 'em up speedruns out there. I don't run it myself, but a number of my friends do. And it's one of the most technical by far, but it's also one that features elements you don't really see in a lot of beat 'em ups, like a level up system. Like you actually buy the weapon that wins you the game, so you don't really get to do that in a lot of games.
Yeah,
Not like that.
That game specifically is like very hard.
It
takes a toll on people that try to run it sometimes.
Oh yeah. Yell's right. A good friend of mine, former world record holder. He saw I got down to sub 6, and he was just like, I don't have those. he just didn't push it from that. But he was the world record holder for several years, and now the two above him, like one's sub 6 and the other one's like a low 6. So seeing that game get pushed down was cool. My only real experience with NES beat 'em ups was Double Dragon, which I ran at SGDQ 2018. I had the world record for about a month. I got it right before SGDQ and lost it again. And 5 years ago, sorry, it's 2019, like before times, I ran the Japanese version of The Adventures of Bayou Billy, which is just called Mad City, which the US version is a notoriously difficult game with a great soundtrack. Japanese version is quite a bit easier. They go significantly softer on you. Traded the world record a few times with a runner by the name of Mr. R. Knight, who I think just a couple years ago lost it to Darby of all people. That's someone I never thought would run a beat 'em up, but there was Darby, and he was a huge Bayou Billy fan, so he just bought both times. I was like, hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
You do more than the Mario. Go for it.
Yeah, I know. That game soundtrack is so good. So.
It really is. Like you could listen to just the first stage theme, and you already know the soundtrack is amazing. You don't even need to hear the rest of it.
Luckily, the rest of it is good too. But yeah, that opening
yes, very much so.
Quite the introduction.
Konami hit the pedal to the metal on that one. For sure.
Something I've definitely noticed a lot of beat 'em up games kind of like that have pretty good soundtracks.
Very much so. It's I mean, the colloquialism in speedrunning is, if you're gonna run a game, make sure stage 1 has a really good music track to be able to listen to over and over and over again that you don't get tired of, and that works out really well for a lot of those, especially like I mentioned the aforementioned Double Dragon, amazing soundtrack for the NES. I actually think it's a better soundtrack than the arcade version, which I also used to run. Yeah, the NES chiptune set just did great things for that game.
Oh yeah, yeah. You made me think. I know the NES was like kind of one of the first systems that kind of had that genre onto a home system, and obviously they had to downgrade it a bit from arcades because they were just not the same power at all. Like, how does that affect the genre, I guess?
In a lot of cases, they actually had extra content. For example, in Well, in Double Dragon, they actually kind of tone it down. In Double Dragon, you have a level up system, which isn't a weapon you buy. You have to do specific attacks and get experience points, and by the end of it, you have the best move in the game. But in the arcade version, you just start with the best move, so that's just all you ever do,
Hmm.
and it's just as good in both versions of the game. Whereas take a game like I don't know TMNT2, the arcade game for the NES, which is just TMNT, the arcade game for the arcade. They added like 2 extra levels. A lot of the levels were longer. It makes the game longer to play. It's like a 25 to 30 minute run as opposed to the sub 15 that the arcade version is. But for the at-home consumer at the time, more content for a purchase game meant more good, and that's all they wanted to focus on. But the concept is still like it's still fine. I think it's relevant enough that for me, I consider each entity to be a completely separate game, which I've learned that some speedrun fans don't because they'll ask like, "Hey, you know this glitch you showed here? Can this work on this version too?" It's like,
Hmm.
no, you don't have doesn't have the power to do that. Not set up that way.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, because
Um,
you just assume it'd be worse because arcade hardware was so advanced
mhm.
compared to the home hardware at the time.
Yeah, the downside of that is a lot of arcade games from that time period were kind of jank,
Mm.
like a lot of them. I'll give another example. Kung Fu, aka Kung Fu Master in the arcade. I actually think the NES version of that game is just a lot more robust. It feels better to play. It doesn't feel as loose. Like it actually feels like a lot more responsive.
Mm. Yeah.
Game's also very short. It's not a belt scroller, but it's considered a brawler for the same reason that like anything else I named. What's another one? Trying to think of never mind. I was thinking of something else in Spartan X series. I think like Spartan X2, but that never got released in the US, so we're not discussing that. But yeah, something like Kung Fu Master, I think is being a lot tighter game on the NES makes it just a better game package. Same thing with Double Dragon. Double Dragon Arcade feels very loose. If it wasn't for the fact that you started the game with elbow, that game would be kind of a nightmare. But you just start with one of the best moves in beat 'em up history, so you just always do it because why not?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Burn and turn.
So yeah, it sounds like for the NES that it actually did pretty well with its uh, arcade conversions,
Mm,
despite the limited hardware.
yeah, and plus you got a at home co-op play. The
Mm.
downsizing of like say TMNT downsizing from like 4 players to 2 players was relevant, but you could always just play with your friends at home. It wasn't the case of like, hey, who's going to run out of money first? You just
Hmm.
co-op it and try to beat it,
Yeah.
which I always appreciated.
Yeah, it's another thing that's interesting about the NES is they still weren't sure like how to make it different from arcades. So a lot of games were kind of structured the same way, where you would, in theory, are losing quarters that don't exist.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, the challenge was still there, but it wasn't quite the same. Like
mhm.
it always felt a lot more fair, even for games that are like brutally difficult. Like to not use an arcade team here, Ninja Gaiden. Like the game, despite being brutally difficult, is still like a fair game. You know, like you have to learn a lot when you're playing it, but it's the same thing with any home arcade port. There's not like quite as much just like, hey, we're gonna throw this in here just because f the player and all that. You know, so it's just whatever's there is there. That's not to say these games don't have RNG. It's just that it's a lot easier to control in most cases.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not
Even a
as
game
much
like
complicated things going on the NES
yeah,
in
yeah.
comparison.
Another example I could use is Contra. Contra Arcade is an incredibly loose feeling game. It doesn't feel. I've once CC'd it. To me, it doesn't feel great to play. Whereas Contra NES is just a hallmark. Like it's probably one of the top 50 games on the console. Everybody knows and loves Contra. Who's played it?
Yeah,
Even those that are just like, oh, this game's so hard. Like they've still played it and they still enjoyed it. So.
hmm, that's a good example of like I consider Contra an NES game. I forgot
Mm.
it was an arcade game. So
Right. Yeah, so is Jackal. A lot of people forget that one too.
I'm learning that today.
Hmm. So is Super C. It was called Super Contra in arcade,
Well,
but yeah, it was there.
yeah, I assumed that one at least if Contra
Hmm.
was one as well. But
Right, right.
yeah, they just feel at home on the NES almost, I guess. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
they always felt like labors of love during that time period. I can't personally recall any that were just like, God, what a terrible port of the game. Like nothing really sticks to mind like that. Like if people didn't like it on NES, it was still probably worse in arcade.
Hmm.
You know, so
Well,
for any number of reasons.
that's interesting and I guess cool it worked out that way then.
I think
'Cause-
so. Yeah. Like I said, I just treat it as two entirely separate entities is all. And even you get like Game Boy ports, like Avenging Spirit was an arcade game first, and that game's amazing, but nobody would have played it outside of like there's the Game Boy version. There's I think it was I don't remember if it was a Turbo Graphics game or not. No, I'm thinking of a Ninja Spirit. Sorry, different thing. But like, yeah, just stuff like that. A lot of people just don't know like it had roots there. Kiwi Craze was the New Zealand story in arcades, and it looks almost exactly the same as the arcade version. Different, different. What's the word I'm looking for? Warps though. Like that game has a lot of warps, and they're in different places between both versions.
Mhm. I'm surprised they have warps on arcade versions.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, for a game like New Zealand story, it's kind of necessary for the most part. Like, yeah, I guess you could do it just every stage if you wanted to, but nah. I once conceded I didn't play every stage. I was like, this game is a jerk. Sometimes I wanna finish it.
I see.
Just took the 80% route.
But yeah, I'm not too familiar with the arcade scene.
Hmm.
Obviously, I grew up in a time where they weren't a thing anymore or anything.
Yeah,
So I was lucky enough to
I
have the NES. So
yeah, I definitely grew up with them. I mean, I'm in my early 40s now, and our local Walmart had a few machines that have like TMNT, Street Fighter 2, Sunset Riders, WrestleFest. Like they'd rotate stuff. We had a mall with an arcade. We had an arcade that was just outside of town that was really strong. We had them at malls further up north. Like it was the time to be a fan to me.
mm,
Some people claim like the early to mid 80s was, and that's legit, but I wasn't playing until like the very late 80s. Like when I first discovered TMNT in arcades, I was just like, oh, so this is what video games can be. SMB was my first game.
hmm,
I played it when I had my tonsillectomy at a hospital. Someone in the side room had it, and I was like, heck yeah, this is what video games are. This is great. And seeing that game as in TMNT for the first time at like my local Walmart showed me what games could be as opposed to what they are.
mhm.
It's like, wow, this is like playing an episode of the TV series. This is incredible.
Yeah,
So immersive.
because at that point arcades were still like leagues ahead of consoles.
In terms of the hardware output, yes,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean the NES should be overlooked. Like it's
No,
aged as well as it has for a reason.
yeah, I just meant the visual, like to
Right.
passing bystander that doesn't know the
Mhm.
intricate details. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah, even like the following generation, like arcades during that time were like primarily 16-bit output, but
Mhm.
even arcade versions of games had a lot more like animation frames for character movement. Like they put a lot of work into those because there wasn't really much they had to worry about. There wasn't They had a lot faster processing. There weren't like load times. And yes, the SNES did have load times. They wouldn't say it like it did on a PlayStation, but
Hmm.
it was still have to load scene to scene and take a moment to do so and da, da, da. And then some games just didn't have good SNES ports at all because of that. So
Mm. Yeah, I'm curious then, did the because the SNES had like a much closer output to arcade output,
mhm,
where but the NES, didn't, but it still had its
mhm.
like reason it's its own thing. Did the SNES kind of ruin that, or was it still pretty good?
It's a mixed bag.
Mm.
Early titles mostly were not good. Some turned out to be very good. The first two titles that come to mind there are Gradius 3, a Konami shmup, a very difficult one. I actually think the SNES version of that game is a lot more compact than the arcade version, and like Konami really did a good job with that home port. The other example is Final Fight, which is one of the most famous beat 'em ups of all time, but the SNES version is well known for being a very lackluster port. To name a few reasons, it doesn't have co-op play, which for a console beat 'em up is criminal,
Yeah.
especially in 1991. And it was a launch title, so like you could tell they were getting their feet wet, but still, like really, guys. It had really bad input lag. It had
Ooh.
missing animation frames. It ran like molasses. Like it was not good. Like people still remember it because they got to play Final Fight at home, and that was that was something to be commemorated. But it hasn't aged well. Even just playing it as recently as like 5 years ago for the most recent times, I was like, God, this game is just so bad. Like it does not play well at all. But there are people that love it because they have nostalgia for it. More power to them. I just choose not to play that version of it.
Mm.
So again, mixed bag. Those two sticking out are the ones that are primarily there. Oh, also it cut a stage. Like it actually completely removed a stage in Final Fight SNES just to show that what they had to do to conserve memory.
Mm.
A year later, we got a Turtles in Time SNES, and that actually is to me much better than the arcade version. It's missing animation frames, but it added a whole new stage. It upgraded a lot of the boss fights. It expanded the move set of each character. Like it actually what's the word I'm looking for? It actually gave stats to each of the 4 characters. So playing each of the 4 turtles felt really different, which was great. Like that hadn't really happened since like the first TMNT on the NES, where we well know about that one. Donatello was overpowered, and that's just how it is. But yeah, that game I actually think was a pretty rare upgrade for that time. Sunset Riders was pretty close to arcade, a little bit slower, but it was fine compared to like Final Fight. It was obviously like a leap above, but that also came sometime later. Then you had other Capcom stuff like King of Dragons and Knights of the Round, which were very good arcade ports. Missing some animation frames, but that's just kind of what happens when you have to compress. You have to go from however big those processors are down to like what is it, 12, 16 megabits per card or whatever it is. Like they had to downsize some things, but they did good jobs with those for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So again, mixed bag. I'd say the SNES was more hit than miss, but the misses were really bad.
I see.
Like really, really bad.
I just remembered Dragon Slayer NES. Now that there's a difference compared to the arcade version.
And there's also Dragon Slayer NES, which is also completely different. Those games are rough. Those games are really rough.
Oh, is there a SNES? I said NES. I didn't know if there was.
Oh, Dragon Slayer? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really jank. You run across clouds. It doesn't make any sense, but
yeah, I just know the NES being absurdly dumb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're special. they're really special. But of course, like they weren't trying to replicate what the arcade did. Like you couldn't do like full motion video type stuff on those consoles yet. Like we didn't have CD quality yet, and that still took a while. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's easy. You can just look, the whole collection is available on Steam. I'll just download and play Dragon Slayer and Dragon Slayer 2 and Space Ace and all this stuff.
Yeah,
way different.
You got to get into the mindset of back then where it wasn't possible and or available. So
yeah, that game, the original Dragon Slayer, came out 2 days after I was born, so obviously I missed that mark. But I understand the legacy it had. It was huge at the time. Like machines would break down just because like the hardware having to be synchronized with itself was like a huge pain. So a lot of like out of order was very common, but the game has its legacy, and there's a valid speed run for it. Like I played the Steam version, and it actually has skips that don't exist in the arcade version. It's pretty cool. One wouldn't expect. Shout out to Flannel Cat for showing me that one.
Interesting.
For sure.
What was I gonna say? Sometimes I lose my train of thought. So
happens. I've done podcast hosting myself. It's normal.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What's that? You've done this. What is this? Episode 60.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, I get to be a multiple of 10.
You do. It worked out that way, I guess.
To offer a reverse of that, you've got arcade like the versus titles for NES, and those are just much harder versions of their NES counterparts because one, they usually up the damage. In the case of like versus Castlevania, like I think everything does twice as much damage, so it's disgusting. Like the damage boosts are so much more like you really have to like space those out and all that good stuff. Whereas on NES, like damage boost is like 70% of the speed run, you know. So
yeah.
And then you got like versus SMB, which the furthest warp in the game takes you to World 6. So you have to play World 6, 7, and 8. And even past that, I can't remember if it's World 6 and or 7 actually has lost levels mixed in.
So a fair amount
up the difficulty
of the game
more
has lost levels in it. I think even it's versus, right? Like 1-4 or 2-4, I think has one.
That sounds about right.
And then
I just remember
a bunch at the end. Like that game has no duplicate stages like SMB1 does. So anything that would be a duplicate is instead a lost level stage. And I could be wrong in this, but I think that Versus came out before Lost Levels, so it was like kind of that in between thing where they were like, I don't know, maybe still creating stages for that, or they created the stages for that game and then put them in Lost Levels. I'm not entirely sure how the history works out there, but yeah, it's kind of that in between.
Could have been they could have treated it like a beta test, and it did come out the year after. Lost Levels in Japan was 86, is that right?
Yeah.
So that means they would have come out the same year. To offer a similar parallel, Haunted Castle, which is It's essentially arcade Castlevania. It's not exactly that, but think of it as like how Castlevania 4 is a reboot. Haunted Castle is like also its own reboot.
Mm.
There was music in Haunted Castle that was later used in Castlevania 2, which came out the following year. Like Bloody Tears is like the stage 3 theme, but that was the first game it was featured in before Castlevania 2, and a lot of people probably didn't know about that. I just remember spending some time with versus SMB, and I got to 6-3, and those long jumps, like, I just can't do them. I cannot do those. Of course, I tried playing on a stick, which is probably way harder than playing the game on a pad, but it was native, you know. So, yeah, those jumps, like, I'm just like, God, this is just not my style anymore. It's
Yeah, I
too
think
much.
6-3 has a mandatory 3-frame jump in the stage,
Cute, cute.
and
Yeah, had I
that's
known,
60 FPS, so a little hard.
A little bit, Probably would have practiced it a little bit more if I had known that. But that's not a big window. That's for sure.
No, yeah, the levels that are in
One.
versus are ridiculous, and then like a lot of levels are just altered to be slightly harder too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think they got rid of a lot of the power ups, or instead they're just like a single coin block.
They probably did. If I went to go look up to research that kind of stuff, I would imagine a lot of runs are probably just small Mario. Like they probably just memorize a lot of jumps. If there's any mushrooms obtained, it's probably for damage boost purposes, but maybe not, for all I know.
The speedrun for any
Others.
percent gets fire.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think it's worth it because the fire kills the Bowsers faster.
Yeah,
Like that, it skips the animation, and I think because you have to play more worlds, it ends up saving time. Plus, at the end, the way that A4 is structured is the Bowser arena. There's this giant ceiling right above him, so you can't like jump over him. So you either have to hope he jumps forward so you run under, or take the damage boost with your fire flower. So if it was small only, it'd be a pain.
Yeah,
because you'd have to like
a lot more
win a
too.
1 and 3 essentially.
Like, and it also, because the game is mandatory to be longer. Like if you're doing any percent, for example, if there's frame rules that exist for it, they're probably like significantly more strict. Like a frame rule for
I feel like that game does it differently because I've ran it, like the home version, and when I remember splitting, it seems like it would be offset a lot. So I wonder exactly how that works. I'm not knowledgeable about it. I could probably find people that are and would actually tell me the answer, but I'm currently not sure.
There's also probably just like a lot more room for optimization. Like it's one thing to optimize like an NES game, it's essentially 8 stages, the 80% run. Whereas versus SMB, you're playing like I think it's 16. If you can go 1-1-1-2, 4-1-1-2, or 4-2-6-1, and then the other 12 stages, like 16 stages broken down to like frame rules. Like there's a lot more to have to keep track of. It's not just like, hey, I start the stage in this frame rule. Like whereas like a lot of top runners of SMB, you're going to be able to notify. Whereas versus SMB, like that's a lot more to dissect. So, and admittedly, a lot of other versus titles I haven't really messed with. I did play a little bit of versus Ice Climbers while I was at speedrun sessions.
The versus
no
Ice
thanks.
Climbers.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. The jumps feel a lot sludgier. Like I felt like I couldn't move at all. It was rough. There's versus Goonies 2. Yeah, it's a strange one. Versus Balloon Fight, which I always thought that was kind of redundant. I was like, Balloon Fight's just Joust, and Joust is really popular, but I guess Nintendo wanted their hand in that bucket too. So good on them.
Yeah, I guess I'm not familiar with every title in the versus line.
There's a lot more out there than I thought there would be. Versus Castlevania is a very long run. Most 1CCs have it around like the 40-minute mark because you have to play safe. Playing that game safe is not fun. Especially if you're trying to finish it on like not one life. But I mean like the NES Castlevania is just full of like time saves. I'm not saying they're easy, it's just they're all there. You have damage boosts, you have boss glitches, just there's all kinds of stuff that can just make the run feel smaller than it is. Or if you're trying to just play safe, a lot less wiggle room.
Castlevania NES is one of the most like optimized and difficult runs.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Makes me wonder when that's going to get down to the frame like SMB is now.
Well, I mean, they do have their frame rules, so
I don't doubt it.
They know what they're doing. But yeah, it's funny that the versus is so much different then, because I assume it's the same stages otherwise, right?
As far as I know, like it doesn't throw in like Castlevania 3 stages or anything. The stages are all the same. Just the big difficulty bump is the damage. Like anything that would do 3 damage to you is probably doing 6. think Ninja Gaiden 3 JP to Ninja Gaiden 3 US. Like it's just stacking damage on top of you. So damage boosts are a lot more strict. Like you just really can't take a lot of them you normally be able to do. Like to me in Castlevania NES, life is a resource because that's what damage boosts are there for. Like you use those to be able to make sure you can save a number of seconds to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Arcade, if you're taking double damage from everything, not so much the case. There could also be some different variants on sub-weapon use. I don't know if Holy Waters is busted. I would assume it is, but I haven't checked.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Just I know like versus SMB's differences, so I'm not familiar with all the other games because I don't even know what all of them are. So, but it's very interesting that they're all different in some way. Probably.
It was yeah. They wanted to up the difficulty, so it's just how they did it. I don't know if any devs aside from Nintendo and Konami dipped their feet into it because like when Nintendo you had SMB, Balloon Fight, Ice Climber, Castlevania for Konami, Goonies 2. Like outside of those two devs, I don't know if anybody else decided to mess with it. I would have to research that. Had I known we were talking about it, I probably would research it myself. But
no, it's fair.
Here we are.
Yeah, you never know. You never know what's going to be brought up. So.
Yeah, and the Versus series is kind of fascinating. Like I kind of thought it was in a way. Like looking back, I was like, isn't this kind of pointless? Like people are already playing this at home. One of these is a game that actually came with the console, so literally everybody who has the console has it. But I guess if somebody didn't have an NES, they could just play it at the arcade, except it was much harder. So
yeah, it was not the same game, that's for sure. It's actually
not
Mario
at all, especially
1 specifically is just so weird because it has like 5 different versions for some reason.
Yeah, and of course, like it's hard to actually play a hardware version of the game. So if you're playing on an emulator, like all those, like you mentioned, like a three frame jump, like time that in emulator time. Gnarly.
Yeah, once input lag becomes a factor, that becomes multitudes of more difficult.
Yeah, it's a struggle, no doubt, but
yeah,
just one of those things you accept.
Yeah, and this is what like MAME is for, right? That's
yeah. That's what I do. That's what I primarily do my runs on.
Yeah, I've never.
That's out of like. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I've never used it because I've always been a console person. Like even my PC play is limited, but yeah, that's just not a game resource I've used much, I guess.
It's I've used MAME as far back as like I think I was using it as far back as college. I was just running it through DOS prompts. It was kind of cool. It was like, hey, I can play arcade games on my stupid little Windows XP PC. This is great. And of course, not much has changed about it now. It's just that there are a lot more games available. Once I got hooked up with like an 18,000 game library, I was just like, well, if there's something I want to play, I'm probably going to be able to play it because that's a lot of games. I don't think any console ever created has that many games. Granted, some are just like different ports of games, and some are just unplayables. Like, who wants to play not Mahjong? You know, like those you can't play those. Video poker, stuff like that. But it still probably rounds out to about 10,000 games. So as far as like the openness and like the variety of what you can play, I would not change it for anything. But it obviously comes with its downsides. Like everything is a readjustment of timing and things like that. But it's easy.
And then
that's why I don't mind it.
The other thing is obviously arcade games had so many different varied control schemes that sometimes can't be emulated properly.
Right. In fact, I was just talking to my girlfriend about that yesterday. I was explaining to her the concept of a trackball. And I was like, because she used to play Asteroids in arcades, which is a trackball game. And I was like, yeah, trying to play trackball on like a lever, on like a stick, not fun. It really sucks because the sensitivity is just so different. So like trying to play Marble Madness arcade was just not intuitive at all. Like everything felt like I was just shoving the ball into one direction, no matter how lightly I was tapping it. Same with like, so I think of some others, Sinistar, Crystal Castle, stuff like that. But Marble Madness is, for NES runners, is by far like the most like, oh, hey, that was a game in the arcades too. So
now, granted, I think it's a trackball game because I'm so used to the the D-pad movement of how that game works.
And to be honest, I think that's the optimal way to play it. I actually think that's another example of a superior home port. I think Marble Madness NES is just a brilliant piece of business. Like it's aged well, it plays well. It's really difficult, but it's also very rewarding. Whereas Whereas arcade is like, unless you're playing it on this specific piece of hardware, like you're probably gonna have to struggle a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not aware of like every different control scheme. I just know that some don't translate well to the. They
Yeah,
just can't. There's so many different control schemes.
yeah. There's twin sticks.
Yeah.
Those are gross.
Oh.
Those are super gross. Unless you're trying to play that on like a PS4 controller, like good luck. It's
I
so
see.
it's so gross. Like you can map it to a keyboard, use like arrow keys and number pad, I guess, but then like where are your buttons, like it's a nightmare. Like trying to do that on like an actual arcade stick just doesn't work.
I see.
But that's just how things ran. Like everybody had to do. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but like in the arcades, like you weren't getting new hardware upgrades with next consoles. Like the NES to SNES transition was like 2 buttons to 6, and that allowed the player to be able to just have a lot more utility and a lot more action and things like that. Whereas for the arcades, they would just come up with new machines that would just be brand new cabinets all by themselves. Like, hey, here's this thing you never used before. Have fun.
Hmm.
Like the aforementioned twin sticks, trackball, things like that.
Yeah.
Things that were just not intuitive until you spent a lot of time with them.
Yeah. I guess that's like the defining characteristic of what made arcade games unique is that yeah, you can't. There's some things you can't bring over to the controllers they had that were meant to be like universal.
Correct.
So it's
Absolutely
interesting
correct.
what you chose and what you can do on like nowadays modern emulation and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I'm sure
Yeah,
it's a
like you
rabbit
can
hole.
set up like, well, I mean, like everything has its own upside. You can set like a light gun game to be controlled by a mouse, which is
Hmm.
interesting. Like it's a unique way to play it. For SNES, there's at least one emulator where you can play Super Scope games using the mouse. In fact, I've done that before. I actually find it kind of fun that way.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I do like my Zapper, but yeah, I forget they had like big
Yeah.
Zapper for SNES, and no one has it really.
I had it growing up. It was a pain. Like that thing
Mm-hmm.
ate batteries. It was huge. Like there was no way to compartmentalize that thing. It was just like, hey, here's this giant long bazooka. Where am I putting this? Next to the TV? It's gonna be an eyesore.
Mm-hmm.
Zapper, you can just put in a drawer.
Zapper's
And of course,
nice
like,
because it plugs in. It
mm,
didn't need batteries.
yeah, it didn't need the overhead sensor as well. Like kind of what they
Mm-hmm.
got later for the Wii. Like the Super Scope required that little like that sensor to be put on top of your television, and it was just like,
Yeah.
hey, we're trying new things. Like, yeah, but should you have? Maybe you shouldn't have. But I loved my Zapper growing up. The only game I played with it was Duck Hunt, obviously. But Bayou Billy US has the option of like playing controller and Zapper for some stages because they're first person shooter rail stages and
Mm,
things
that's
like
right.
that. And you can switch between them. The only person I think that was ever brave enough to do that was Feasel.
Hmm.
When I played Mad City, I only played a controller. I was like, nope, we're doing rail shooters on this NES controller. No matter how much it sucks, we're doing it.
Hmm. It's interesting. Yeah, I
Mm,
forgot that game's unique in that it has light gun stuff
yeah,
with it as
you
well.
can you can do both. Yeah.
Hmm.
In the same game, no less. It's not like track and field where you can pick like you can play on NES controller, you can play on the trackpad,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but you can't do both.
Mm. Yeah, I guess I had the Duck Hunt with Mario one, so we didn't have
Same.
I never had a power pad, so I
I
guess
didn't either.
that's a whole nother rabbit hole I don't know about.
Same. That and like the Power Glove. Like
Oh
I
my
never even,
god.
I've never even had one of those in my hand. Same with the trackpad. Like I've never stood on a floor that had like the power pad on it. Like I'm
Hmm.
out. Like I got nothing. I only saw commercials for it. I had no interest in getting it. There's nothing to do it for.
Hmm.
Power Glove intrigued me because I played a lot of MTPO as a kid, but it
Hmm.
probably would have felt a lot worse than it would have on an S pad. But yeah,
Yeah, I
that
don't
game plays
know
fine in its
how
native.
I don't know how responsive that thing is for real. I can only imagine not very good.
Not gonna hazard a guess. There's another one I prefer to NES. Punch Out to Arcade Punch Out. Arcade Punch Out's its whole beast. Like
That's
you
an
have like top
entirely
screen,
different
bottom
game.
screen.
Yeah.
hmm Yeah, it has some of the same music. Like the round start music is exactly the same, but of course it has like more voice samples and um, the control scheme is just light years different. Like it's not
Hmm.
just like top and bottom. You can go top, you can go bottom, you can go side.
Hmm.
You have to defend different ways. Like, yeah, it's hard. I've not properly messed with Punch It Arcade, but MTPO is like one of my favorite games of all time. Like, I'm surprised I never picked up the speed run for it.
Yeah, I mean that's actually one of the like games that are different to my usual palette of speedrun that I actually
Mhm,
have dabbled with.
mhm.
I don't know,
It's a
something
great
about
game,
yeah.
and the speed run's amazing. It's like it's really really hard at the highest level because like once I learned how the Sandman fight works, I was like, God, 9 frame perfect punches in the first minute. I don't understand. Tell me
Yeah.
more. That's insane.
Yeah, there's over 20 if you want to optimal Tyson at the very end of your run, which already has
Hmm.
like insane amounts of RNG in it. It's like, yeah,
Hmm.
sign
Yeah.
me up, please. No.
Yeah. That's why there's only like what the top 3 to 5 runners have like really, really dug in with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
Not for the faint of heart.
yeah, I love top level runs of that game. I watch it all the time. It's just crazy because of
Hmm.
how the game is so
Hmm.
unique
Yeah.
in that way.
It's very manipulative. It's very technical. And yeah, I agree. It's great to just watch people just grind it out.
Hmm.
It's also interesting in that I think it's maybe the earliest game that uses IGT as its primary
Mm.
speed run time. Like, I mean, this predates Sonic, obviously, of
Hmm.
course.
Yeah, I know you can time it RTA, but that actually gives even more RNG, although I don't think it swings it as much. But
Mm,
fighters can just decide to lay down longer or get up and then fall back down or something. It's just
hmm.
yeah, why?
Yeah, not everything's as cut and dry as Bald Bull 2 staying down for not till 9 every single time he gets knocked down.
Hmm.
But yeah, like something like Don 1, like, oh, you missed time that on the frame. He's probably not going to get up until 9. And if you're RTing that, yeah, I see exactly where you're coming from with that now. Sounds gross.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think how if there were any other like earlier games that would have used the in-game for it because I guess not a lot of games even track that kind of thing. I mean, even MTPO's primitive, there's only like a handful of decimals that you can
Mhm.
actually get.
And of course, it's also their in-game timer, and MTPO in-game time is real fast. Like those
Oh
seconds
yeah,
are
it
not seconds;
goes.
they're like 3/4 of a second,
Mhm.
if that.
Yeah, that's what I find interesting. Uh, MTPO versus Super Punch Out, like
Hmm.
the single segment run. Like they're both like fairly, I'd say even maybe around the same like RTA kind of length. But in terms of like in-game time, MTPO is looking like around 15 minutes, and then Super Punch Out's like 2 minutes because of how their IGT
Yeah,
works.
yeah, yeah. Because like in Super Punch Out, I can count on exactly 0 hands the number of times I've seen a match go to round 2.
Hmm.
Right. So like, I mean, you're always just wasting them right out, and I mean, like the RNG is clearly there, but
A lot of them end
it doesn't wear
before
itself
the
quite
10
as well out.
second mark.
Hmm. Yeah, especially the earlier fights. Like Gabby J goes down in like 6 something, I think,
Hmm.
done optimally. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's wild.
yeah. I you were talking about how you saw the blindfolded Punch Out
Mm.
uh 2014. Did you
Yep.
see the Super Punch Out was right after? Did you see that one too?
Did not see that one. I watched Punch Out as a VOD. I went back
Mm.
later and watched Super Punch Out. I remember I went to visit a friend of mine later that year in Colorado. While I was staying with her, I brought my laptop with me, and at night, if I was just chilling out in the guest room, like I was just watching archive VODs from HDQ 2014 from that earlier that year,
Mm.
which I understand, according to like most longtime attendees, that it's one of the best GDQs ever. Like it had one of the best Super Metroid races. It had some of the last great runs of games that just don't see that much anymore. Like I think it was the last time Trihex ran Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, I'm pretty sure. So that was significant. There was, of course, both blindfolded punch out runs. It got my attention because there was the first time I ever watched a speed run of X Men Mutant Apocalypse run by Molotov, who was a runner of the game at the time. So that got me onto it. Like I played the heck out of that game as a kid. And I was like, oh, I'm curious what this is like as a speed run, and it became like my first GDQ run and like my third overall speed run. So my
Hmm.
significance for that game is there as well. And of course, like anything else mixed in there that you see at like every event, the Mega Mans. That was the first time I saw a Mega Man 2 speed run. Cypher ran it that year. That was the first time I ever got to see Zips. So yeah, that
Oh yeah,
that
that's
year that year was huge. I'd never seen Zips. As soon as I saw Quickman stage, I was like, what am I even looking at right now? Like this is just bonkers.
yeah, that game specifically can definitely be an eye opener to the casual onlooker.
Mm-hmm. Oh
Oh
yeah,
man.
yeah. It messed with me because that was one of my favorite games as a kid. But seeing like a whole different way to play it, I was like, this game is gonna age so well just for exactly this reason.
Hmm.
Even if you still want to play it casually, just knowing like the things you could be doing, like I always find that to be really
In
cool.
fact, I think
Even if you don't want to do them.
the Mega Man 2 speedrun was my introduction to speedrunning, ironically enough.
Nice,
Um,
nice. Was it the same one or just like Mega Man 2 as a speed run?
no, what's funny is I think I was trying to look up the soundtrack because it slaps, of course, but
It's a good
um
one. Yeah, it's a really good one.
what came up when I searched it was the original world record progression that Summoning Something in 2017.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
That was an interesting time around then. That was before. I think that was before. Was that before Cool Kid chased it? No, because
um,
the next year was the relay, so that was around the time that like Cool Kid and started like pushing
yeah,
towards LO, and then Cipher came back to claim it later, and yeah.
I don't remember because now my memory has the like remake of that video that included
Hmm.
all the more modern stuff because I think he deleted the that original video due to like the epilepsy because when you show a lot of the end screen with the alien and it
Yeah,
flashes white and black a lot.
yeah. That last boss fight is kind of a problem for exhibition purposes for exactly the reason you named, so I can
Hmm.
understand that. Unfortunate, but it's what it is.
But yeah, that now like unlisted video was my introduction. And it's just funny that it was Mega Man. Although right after the next like recommended video was Mario 1, and so that was
Mm-hmm.
actually the like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, just off
So,
to the races at that point.
but yeah, uh, it's just adding to the point that like the Mega Man 2 run is wow. That is certainly
It's
one of
one
them.
it on paper is one of the best for the NES. Like
Hmm.
it shows what speedrunning can be to me. Like
Hmm.
it's there are very few games that especially on that console that stretch the boundaries of the kind of programming that went into a game the same way that that game does. And I don't know who discovered them first, but I mean that game is already timeless.
Hmm.
It's gonna be it's never gonna go away now. Like people are never gonna forget that game, especially once you've seen that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's funny. I got off topic because I was talking about the Super Punch Out run because we were
Mhm.
talking about like how fast the in-game time is, and it was because I remember from that blindfolded run that he would call his decimal to the exact decimal because it was just that like consistent and fast.
And he had been doing it as much as he had. Like the amount of time that would go into just doing something blindfolded already is like insane. So of course, like I would probably have the visual of if I take the blindfold off and see what time this ended at, I can probably memorize that
Hmm.
as long as everything went the way I wanted it to. And there weren't too many fights that had issues that I can remember. I remember Dawn 2 was pretty awful, but
Mm.
that fight's a grind fest. But what it is, I just remember at the end of the first round, he was like, "All right, I'm just gonna let him taunt me, and I'm gonna run this clock out. And we're gonna finish him off next round," just
Hmm.
because he was just tired of putting up with him.
Yeah. No, yeah, that was a great showcase. But yeah, the
For
Super
sure.
Punch Out actually beat the game, which was crazy because that was like, well, it's
Mhm.
Salad, so that's how it always goes with him. It's like
Mhm.
either never done this before or it's really rare so it won't happen and then it happens like so fluently every time.
Oh yeah, and don't get me started on like seeing the stuff he's done at GDQ like in person. Of course, there was the 1P2C, sorry, the 2P1C run.
Yeah, I was there for that.
His blindfolder run of We Punch Out the summer before that was
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. Like even he was just like, I'm not gonna do this, I'm not gonna do this, and of course he did it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
this man has so much clutch. I hope he drives everywhere with that kind of clutch. He just
Yeah,
there that dude just he can't not perform under pressure.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I hate because the first in-person event I went to was the 2018 summer
Mm-hmm.
GDQ, and I've been to every one that was in person except for that one at summer 2019. So
Mm-hmm.
I would have been there for that, and I missed it. Very sad, but
It was a heck of a thing to see. We were the I was on the floor couch for that one,
mm.
and the whole room was just so loud.
Oh yeah, of
The
course.
only and you I know you were at AGDQ 2020. The only thing at that event that to me was on par with that in terms of like crowd participation was maybe like the Ninja Gaiden 2 race between Jimmy and Becco. Like
Mm. Really?
standing room only,
Hmm.
and it was just so live the whole time.
That's cool. No, I remember the how packed it was for the 2P1C thing.
That was too, yeah. I remember I got floor couch spot for that. I don't remember who called me up for it. I remember I was sitting next to PJ and some other people, and we're just watching the thing happen. And I know they were like so worried about it. But I was just like, dude, it's Zallard and Sinister. Of course they're gonna kill this, and of course they destroyed it. They didn't lose they didn't get it. I don't think they got knocked down a single time, which is just silly. Like that's just so silly to even think about.
Yeah, I don't remember. I just know it was really good.
It's one of my favorite runs into GDQ ever, and especially one of
Mhm.
my favorites to watch live. It was just
Oh yeah.
to me that was like what's great about this not only speed runs but the speed run community because you were just watching two of the best not only do something amazing but do it together. Like that was so
Hmm.
cool.
You always gotta one up it from the last time, and at this point, it's
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know what you could possibly do anymore.
Mm-hmm. And Zalard himself stretched those boundaries. Remember at Awesome 2018, he did the dual punch out STPO run. Sorry, Super Punch Out run on the Wii, where he got to switch between that and like I think it was like the Animal Crossing version, where you had to play like one then the other, but you were playing on the
Mhm.
same controller, so you were playing one game while cutscenes were happening in the other.
I
And he
see.
bopped that too.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, there's so many runs I haven't seen because there's just such a huge backlog of them.
No,
Need to get watching.
it's intense. There's still stuff from this year I haven't seen. I'm not going to name names because I'm not trying to get myself on anyone's bad side, but there's still a lot of stuff from this year. I was like, yeah, I should probably go check that out at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's hard to keep up with them all.
next to impossible, especially for me because I went to staying at the hotel this year. I was staying at a friend's offsite, so I didn't get to like just meander to the stream room whenever I wanted to and stuff like
Mm,
that. So
yeah, you get that. Um,
and of course, like the other thing that I'll bring up for speed running, and of course you're familiar with this since you arrived in sub 5 is nest block, which you run out of the practice room, which it's so cool that like we as the retro community have that while the people who only watch GDQ know nothing about it. I think that's really neat. Like it gives people who don't attend GDQ a reason to maybe want to attend it, especially if they run NES games.
mhm.
Like it feels like a pocket of a pocket, and I've always really enjoyed that. Plus the NES is just it's so easy just to be able to like stream games out of. It's like, oh hey, we have flashcards, we can just rotate runners and do other things and
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good topic. Because I remember Nestblock's like creation. That was AGDQ 2019. It was
yeah.
there was a
It was
RPG run that was like multiple hours. They're like, I wonder how
yep.
many NES games we could beat in that
It was
time, and then it just became its own thing.
It was Final Fantasy. I don't remember if it was 8 or 9, but yeah, it was an overnight run. It was that Friday, and and like you said, we wanted to see how many NES games could be beaten in that amount of time because that was the first year where AGDQ pushed their own Nest block out. Like they still had Nest block, but it wasn't like what it had been. AGDQ 2018 was the last year that they had like a full Nest day on Wednesday because Wednesday,
Oh,
and
okay.
that was one of the best NES blocks ever. And the following year, Enemy and Yells and myself started that up as an answer to that. Like we wanted to be like, hey, how many games can we have on the schedule? We don't have this giant RPG taking up all this much time. And of course, like we not only managed to cram a bunch of runs during that time, but it kept going beyond that. And now it's just like a mainstay at GDQ events in the one of the side rooms.
Hmm.
Big fan.
Oh yeah. Um, I think I've done something for everyone I've been at
Mhm.
because yeah, it's
I,
so
re-
easy to just walk and be like, hey, can I do something? Yeah.
I
And
remember.
like go.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just sit on down. I remember the first time I saw you attend with it was awesome 2020. That's the year I ran it. It was the relay. It was like you and Roy and Sonic and at first it was Cosmic, but we messed up the recording, so Cosmic wasn't available, so we had Takate fill in,
Hmm.
and both ended up being great. So that was really cool. It's also really cool that like you get to see NES runners play games that you wouldn't normally associate with them. Like it might be like a side run they do. It's like, no, this is gonna be fun. I just want to play it,
Hmm.
or just like weird non-trivial things like Yells and Saria this year doing the co-op run of River City Ransom was one of the most entertaining things we're seeing. Saria was just popping off at everything. Like that game gets so angry at you. He was just fighting back, and it was great. Of course, he showed up and did the sub 5 of SMB on like 10 seconds notice, which was also
Yeah.
glorious.
Yeah. I.
We had a Mega Man relay this year. Like it was amazing.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of good stuff. Yeah. I'm not very. I don't know. Loud. I guess. So
Mm.
I'm I know you were kind of the hype man for that one at the end.
I popped off so hard, and I remember even when they did the watch back for it on the Nestblock Twitch channel, I said I do not apologize for how loud I was there. Mad Mega and I we were apoplectic. I was like, oh my god, did this really just happen? We were so happy.
Yeah.
It was.
I submitted any percent for GDQ because that doing that at Nestblock made me think, what if I did this on the stage?
Has there ever been a sub 5 of that game at GDQ?
No way. I don't think. I would have heard
I
about it.
know the last any percent I remember was when Cosmic ran it as a one-handed bonus run at SGDQ 2018. I don't think he sub 5. He had 2 deaths, so you could definitely not sub 5. He had 2 deaths, but
I don't think there was even a sub 5 one-handed then yet. Or maybe there was. No, I don't know.
I mean, after your work with Lost Levels, or actually, was it SMB all levels last year where you did it, or was it Lost Levels? I couldn't remember for summer 2023.
Oh, the one-handed that was Warpless Mario 1.
Mario 1, yeah. So pitch it again as well. I mean, it's too late because submissions are closed. But like, hey, pitch it again as like, hey, Cosmic did it. I can do it too, and you still can do the whole thing. Let's see if I can do it sub 5. I'll even put a 5
with one hand.
Just
no, I'd be happy if I could get it two-handed on the stage.
It was an idea, so that's fair.
Yeah, the one-handed sub 5 would be asking a little too much, I think. Because
there's a lot that you'd have to do. That's for sure.
And I probably couldn't be the one to do that specifically because I'm not good with the D-pad movement. Like anytime you have to press left, it's over.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, like some things, it feels like you need to be able to have left. But I remember, I want to say Cosmic either pulled off or went for some really silly stuff. Remember, he went for Bullet Bill Glitch, and I think he may have gotten it. I was like, how'd you do that one-handed? Man.
To be fair, BBG is just a frame perfect jump and winning a coin flip. So it's about as hard with one hand as it is with two. So it's not too bad, but
fair.
Yeah.
It was
the hard thing is getting flag glitch with one hand. That's the hard thing.
Yeah. I would believe that. As someone who's never run that category, I would absolutely believe that.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, back to Nestblock, I guess. Yeah, I remember its inception. And yeah, you were a part of its like creation process. I know.
Yeah, I remember
like,
that
Yells and Enemy were like the more talkative like front runners. Like when they released it all on YouTube, they like did a little preview show about it. But yeah, you were also part of that.
Yeah, and I remember I still remember the lunch we had where that was discussed. It was the three. Actually, I don't remember if Yells was there. I remember Enemy and I were definitely there. Our buddy Smitty Smop was there. Figbird was there. Figbird's an NES runner. He runs MTPO and Felix the Cat. Haven't seen him in a few years, but we were all just having this at lunch just discussing. It's like, well, should we? And yeah, well, those two were at the front of that. Me being an FLRGL teammate, like I was just kind of the lieutenant. I was like, look, whatever y'all need me to do, I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell people. We're going to bring people in. It'll work. Like I am very much at the front of like making sure this works. And then of course Yells ran it at the following event at summer 2019. I ran it at Awesome 2020. I didn't get a lot of sleep at that event, but it was worth it. Because that overnight, just like, man, I like how we have it now. Like Mad Mega just spaced it out across 2 days, and it gives people time during the day to be able to do it.
I think that first Nestblock was like one of my first marathon runs, especially the first one with like a camera pointed at me. So there's that history.
That's really
cool.
I
guess. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's significant for sure. What did you run at the first one? It's been so long since I watched the original.
Mario 1 Warpless. I think it went all right though. So sub 20 probably, not bad.
Yeah, remember all I ran for that was Double Dragon, and that was very rusty. That's not a good game. That's not a fun game to be rusty at either. I finished it. Like I didn't lose the run or anything, but it was still just like, how many ways is this game gonna piss me off today? So
yeah,
of
course. But yeah, but it's fun.
That's not what Nestblock's about. It's just it's there and we have fun with it.
Oh yeah.
You get to see some cool stuff. I love how you get to. I mentioned before getting to see runners do stuff you would normally see from them. For Awesome 2020, a cool kid ran Castlevania, which he had just started learning like 2 months before that. We're just like, want to do Castlevania run? And he'd been playing Home Alone and Garfield all week, so this would be a break from that.
Yeah,
he was on board.
Yeah, I remember you learned Castlevania and then got like a super top time because of
Mhm.
course, but you know, that was
Well, yeah,
before what Castlevania is now with all of its glitches, the
mhm.
scroll glitches. But
Yeah, yeah. But to the point it is now, Castlevania 2024 is not the same game as Castlevania 2020. That is
oh
entirely
no.
accurate.
It's crazy how much it's
Like,
changed.
mhm.
But yeah, guess for the topic of GDQ, you kind of went over it, but
Mhm.
do you remember like all the runs you've done?
Yep, I've done, including online. I've had 8 runs.
Wow.
SGDQ 2017. Yeah, I know I'm very very lucky. SGDQ 2017 was my second event attended, and it was my first time getting a run in. That's when I ran X Mutant Apocalypse. It hadn't been run in 3 years at that point, and the run had actually dropped off quite a bit. The world record time in that 3 year span had dropped by a minute. So
Mm.
between myself and Stunt Coyote and Noble Boy, like we tackled that game really hard. The following summer, which was your first event, summer 2018, that
Yeah.
was the only event I got to run 2 games. I ran Batman Returns, which was my first speedrun game. Like I'm not the only runner of that game, but the game is where it is because of me. Like I haven't tried to beat my time in like 6 years, and no one's else tried to topple it. And I'm not saying it's optimized. It's definitely not. There's time to save. I was just like I've put all I can in this game. I'm the only person that's run into the GDQ, and it felt significant to me to be able to like do that. Like it was the first time I ever had a run at the event that was the first time it was run. Because like I said, X Men
Mhm.
had been run before, Batman Returns did not. And that same event, I ran a Double Dragon, which hadn't been run since Awesome 2012 when Hyde ran it. Hyde was the world record holder of that game for a long, long time before he retired. 2019, I attended both events but didn't have any runs. AGDQ 2020, before the world ended, was when I ran Team and T Arcade, another first. That game had not been run. So that was my fourth. Summer 2020 online, I ran Simpsons Arcade. Awesome 2021 also online, ran X-Men Arcade, both of which were great runs. 2023, so that's up to 6 now. 2023 last year, I've forwent doing any online runs in between then and then. For my first event back, I wanted to start submitting again. Metro and Master and I played X-Men Arcade co-op, and that run was just a blast. Like I think that's the most fun I've ever had doing a GDQ run because this is my first time doing a co-op run. I'd never done anything that wasn't just me. I wanted to make sure the spotlight was on him as well because it was his first GDQ run, and that was significant for him. And then awesome was it 3 months ago now? Is when
Yeah.
I did a run back of TMNT Arcade. That was my first time. Well, not my first time doing a game again because I technically ran X Men twice, but it wasn't the same run. First time around was solo 6 player. Second time was co-op, so not the same category at all. But TMNT was just like, no, we're running it back.
Mhm.
I basically got the same treatment that Cantaloupe did. He wanted revenge on Legend of Zelda, and I got my revenge on TMNT Arcade, and we kind of just closed the book in the pandemic. That was our meme for it. So yeah, that's 8. And I submitted 2 games for summer. I was really late on the deadline. I was gone in Boston for most of the submission period, and I didn't know about it until after I got back. I was like, I thought I had time, but I got back. I submitted Simpsons Arcade as just a run as another like just to do the same thing I essentially did before, but now I do it at an in-person event.
Mhm.
It hasn't been running an in-person event since Awesome 2016, like a long
Mhm.
time ago, when Makina Azul ran, and he's a former world record holder, and also submitted Haunted Castle, which I hope gets in at some point. I might need to optimize it a bit more because my best time's like a 13, and the top times in the game are all like sub 11:30, so
Mhm.
or like low 11s. There's actually a sub 11, but that's a Japanese runner, and that run is insane. Like I don't even want to try to break down the the mechanics that went into that.
Mhm.
But that game's notorious and difficult enough to be like, why not just show this? You know, it's also way outside of my wheelhouse. I've never run a non beat 'em up in a GDQ, and Haunted Castle is not that. It's a Castlevania game.
Mhm.
Like the game has a ton of glitches and a ton of really cool stuff. It's stopwatch the game. If stopwatch is your favorite sub weapon in Castlevania, that's the game to play.
Mhm. I
So we'll
didn't.
see what happens.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, you never not had to beat him up in
hmm
the
I mean,
GTA this
that's my
time.
wheelhouse.
I mean, well, yeah, it
It's
makes sense. It's just interesting
mhm,
with having that many
yeah,
runs and all of them are that genre because
mhm.
it's
and
one of the not as popular genres when it comes to gaming.
yeah, and I also think that like I think that a reason a lot of those games do get in is because they're games that a lot of people remember and they like to showcase that. Granted, my
Mhm.
skill level is very high, but it wouldn't be the same if I were running like a game that maybe like 100 people had heard of as opposed to like games that everyone saw at their arcade, Ninja Turtles, Simpsons, X-Men, everybody knows
Mhm.
these games. So being able to showcase those at high level GDQs, like, yes, we'll let you bring some money to us.
Yeah.
So I'll just keep doing it as long as they'll keep letting me.
Mhm. And I do remember that Batman one from summer. I remember it being quite comedic.
Oh man,
I specifically remember the enemies that just kind of jump to their doom. I don't know,
the
one.
clowns that dodge
Yeah.
you and they jump. Yeah, that's the best part. I was like, hang on, we got time for donations. We have to watch this first. We're gonna watch these clowns take a swing at Batman and then jump to their death because they missed him, and it's the whole crowd was going. I remember that got put on the what is it they do in the GDQs where they just like compile a bunch of the best clips? Like they took that clip and put it on there, and I was just so honored. I was like, cool, I discovered this, and now people got to see it, and it's great. It wasn't even something that like I wanted to find. It was just something I just dicked around with one day. I just kind of was like, what if I duck and they just don't hit me? And he just jumped off. I was like, this is the best thing in this game outside of the really hard stuff. I'm showing this. I even got to laugh at Uyama, and that was wonderful.
But yeah, that moment has stuck with me ever since I saw it at that event. So,
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
yeah, I remember like random nonsense here and there, but yeah, that's just one of the things I remember. I don't know where
I did have a.
if I was watching it from my room or I think I was watching it from my room, but I just remember seeing that. I was just like, this is hilarious.
I just remember I was on my shit with that run. I'd say things like, I'm going to block this missile because I'm Batman. Like, what the like, who says that? But I was just like, I really just don't care. I'm here to have a good time. It's 12 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I'm playing video games for the internet. Like, who cares? You know? And of course, my ever gracious host, Arborelia, who I miss greatly, sorry, not Arborelia, Arlenia, sorry, wrong person. She was doing the Batman voice for the donations, which was also great. It was just all the memes all at the same time. And of course, the skill level was really high. I managed to infinite combo the final boss, and that's 70 reps. That was hard. YR 70 times in a row, so 140 inputs.
Oh.
It was hard. I practiced that a lot. YR. It's you're probably getting. I'm trying to think of how many reps you can get in a second. You're probably getting 3 reps a second, so you probably have like 15 to 20 frames with reps. But he just recovers out of hit stuns so quickly that your timing just has to be on it.
I got it. Okay.
I practiced it a lot for the first 3 months I ran that game. I didn't think it was possible to full infinite him because the timing windows were just so small. I was like, I don't have the endurance for this. And then one day I just did it, and I was like, oh, now I have to do it all the time. Seems hard, but we're gonna do it. And of course, I practiced the hell out of it for that, and it paid off. I got a huge pot for that finish.
Yeah, I remember the ending as well. Being a big deal.
That game also has a banger of a soundtrack. Like it's a Konami SNES game, and they kind of gave it a pseudo Castlevania feel because they were trying to emulate Danny Elfman, who did the score for the movie. So like they brought a lot of like the Castlevania, like the beats and the ambiance and stuff like that. It was tremendous.
Well, so definitely good. A rich GDQ history, I'd say. So
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've enjoyed what I've gotten to do for them. Like I said, I found myself in a good pocket for the things that I can do, but I'm also just very lucky. Like I spent the time with those games that I wanted to spend time with, and it's paid off. And I don't even look at it as like it paid off for me. I think it paid off for everybody. Like the viewing audience wanted to see that. I'm happy they got to. And I always wonder why no one was really messing with those games. I was like, is that up to me? Do I have to be the change I want to see? Because that's how it is with everything, right?
Yeah, of course. You
like,
brought
look
up
your
what up?
I was gonna say, look at what your accomplishments are. Like nobody was doing one-handed warpless before you showed up into the GDQ. Like everybody's played SMB, but
that's not entirely
not a GDQ.
true. Like, there were,
well, I mean, they hadn't done a GDQ, right?
Oh no,
like, that was the first time a GDQ. Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Cosmic did the any percent one-handed, and then I was like, what if I went up to this? You know. But so I submitted warpless. I'm like donation incentive for one hand. And of course it gets met because it's Mario 1. So it's like, okay,
yeah,
here we go.
It's insane.
And then I did the third best one-handed warpless run ever performed.
Money.
It's like, okay. And I have
I
have the best one ever performed. So I have the best and third best ever performed.
Legacy cemented.
Yeah, that was my first ever on stage GDQ run too. So
oh yeah, I guess you weren't in any of the relays prior to that. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, the last relay was what, 2017? Yeah, I wasn't around.
I was there for that.
Yeah,
I was there for that. That's back when LRock was running SMB.
Yeah, he did a small fire.
He crushed that game.
Yeah,
Mhm,
he learned small fire at that event and then did it in that
mhm.
run, and yeah, just
Yeah, like
killed it with it.
how does that man get good at games as fast as he does? It's so silly. Like leave some of
Yeah.
that talent for the rest of us, man. And yeah, of course, like the whole relay was great, but his SMB run was insanely exceptional
Mhm.
for the amount of time that he put into it. Like you said, like it was deathless small fire, and like my God, like he made it look like he'd been doing it for years.
And he was only doing it for a few days.
Yeah, he learned it that week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
that
love
was
a new relay, but I don't know. It's hard to set
it
those up.
would it would take a lot to come that together. Plus, I feel like a lot of those communities have kind of separated. Like I feel like SMW is like pretty far from what the other four are doing. I feel
A
like
little bit.
the NES community is a bit more close knit in terms of like they could just bring that all together. Plus, there's a lot more like actual NES Lost Levels runners now. Where at the time, I think of the three Lost Levels runners, I think only Supersonic ran it on Famicom, right? The others ran the All Stars version. I want to say.
Yeah, I think that was just a preference, like, because they were, or were they? I'm trying to remember because there's the Warpless and then there's the like the all stages version. So there's Warpless 8.4 and then Warpless D4.
Mm,
And 8.4 you usually do on Famicom disk system version.
mm,
And then D4, which is all stages, you usually do it on the SNES version because it's
mm.
easier to access those levels and a lot more fluent. So if
Sure, and
they
there's
did the
also
Warpless on SNES, to me that's even weirder.
yeah,
I don't remember. I wasn't there, so I don't know.
there's also a lot more crossover appeal between the NES games. For example, I mean, obviously, like a lot of SMB runners also run Lost Levels, but then you got someone like Haxer who runs both SMB2 and SMB3, SMB2
Mhm.
US and SMB3. I can't name anybody else who does, but that doesn't. But he could be someone who'd be like, hey, I can do either one, or I can do both in the same team, whatever, you know.
Mhm.
So I think keep it to NES. It could be pretty tightly knit, and it's been 7 years. I think it's time for a return.
Yeah,
That was
I've
the
been in talks multiple times, but it's just, you know, getting out of the pandemic was a little hard, and then enough
oh
people
yeah.
need to go to it that can perform,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's just a hard thing to do. But yeah, I don't like that I missed out on like the relay days. I'd have so much fun with that, I think. And
Yeah, and SMB, especially in 2017, like SMB, the game was in such a special slice of gaming history during that year. That like within the previous year, that's when Darby and like got featured for the first 456, and
mhm.
earlier that year they had the back to back races between Darby and Cosmic and Andrew G of SMB and Lost Levels. So 2017 for 8-bit Mario was a special time.
Oh
Like I
yeah.
don't think anything from that like previous fiscal year will ever be duplicated. So having the relay at summer that year was
Oh my god,
it's
yeah.
just it was a formality. It was like no, this is gonna happen. That was also the first event where I met a number of people I'm still associated with. That's where I first met Supersonic, for example. I knew
Mhm.
him prior to that, but I hadn't met him in person. So getting to meet him for that was just like, yeah, this dude's amazing, and it's gonna be great to see him, watch him do his thing. Because yeah, so
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how long ago that was now.
7 years feels a lot like not as long as it has been, but yeah. But
Mhm.
speedrunning, I've learned time just kind of flies. Like
Yeah.
especially because a lot of those games haven't. I obviously intend no offense, but a lot of those games haven't really evolved much since. Like
Hmm.
SMB Lost Levels are like mostly the same as what they've been. It's not like Castlevania, where it's like they've cut like a minute off the time. It's I think SMB has shaved like seconds since then. So 456 down to 454. The 454 is like the top 50 so times now, right? For SMB. Actually, I could be wrong
56.
about that. No, I'm at
Huh?
454. There are 454s in the game. It shows how much I research it. I haven't looked at this game in like
There's
7 months when Nifsky.
six people with it. 6 people with it. That sounds right.
Yes. Yes. Nifsky still has the top time. I remember I was in Pittsburgh when the time got set. I was staying with my friend with Ellipsis, Marble Madness runner. And I was like, dude, SMB just got run over. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's frame perfect to 8-4 now to the task. Like we
Yeah,
have
it
to watch
is.
this.
It's
Like
yeah.
that's optimized.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah.
wish part of me wishes it didn't get so crazy so fast because there was a point a few years ago where I almost was like a record contender, but that's actually the only main category Mario 1 speedrun I've never had the record in. I've had the other 5 at some point. 5?
And that's certainly nothing to scoff.
6.
I mean,
6.
SMB is just of those categories, SMB is by far the most played. So to even be like at the rank you are is just
Oh no, 5.
an accomplishment in itself for sure. But yeah, I feel you. I understand exactly like how you feel about that in terms of like your time with it, and everything. So
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it's fine. It's just interesting to think about because
yeah,
uh, I
for
have
sure.
seen a lot of change happen over the time because I've been such a huge part of it. So just interesting to
Yeah,
look back on, I guess. Um.
sure.
Oh yeah, because you mentioned it a little earlier, it'd be nice to touch up on, but the
Mhm.
retro gaming live
Yep.
and your involvement with that, I guess.
hmm Yep. I started with RGL in early 2017. I had just started streaming 3 months prior to being recruited. I still remember, and this is a story that was told to me, the moment when that someone decided they wanted me on the team. It was does anybody remember the Speed Gaming Marathon SNES Superstars? It might still be a thing. I haven't run it in quite
I've
some
heard of it,
time.
yeah. Just an all
So
SNES marathon.
right, and that was kind of like my big show out party for speed running. I think I ran like 5 games in that event
Hmm.
just because I just wanted to get my ish in. And the first game I ran was a race. I can't remember the name of the other racer, unfortunately, but I did a race of Ultimate World Combat 3 for the SNES, which is not a game you would ever see in a GDQ, but
Hmm.
because it was a SNES only marathon, Fiesel was like, sure, we'll have it in there. And I remember during the race, I was the only person on comms. Like my opponent was not part of the commentator call, so it was just me talking about it. And I remember, so his enemy, who is one of the founders of RGL TV, said that he was watching that run, and that's when he decided it's like this guy's awesome. Like nobody's playing this kind of stuff at this level. We want him on RGL, etc. And that's when he set it up with his others, and I got to do a couple of like trial streams with them, and the rest was history. I did have a short 8 month hiatus from the team last year while I was trying to get life stuff in order, but I rejoined this past September and I'm still with them. In fact, we got Retrothon coming up later this month, starting on the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
420 Retrothon. Nice.
Nice. Yeah.
It'll be going on for the rest of the week.
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually been on like I don't know what they call it, the stream team, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean. But
Yep. Yeah. We've got our own stream team, but then of course there's also like staff.
yeah, staff stuff.
Yeah.
But
and we've seen like everything through and through, like everything from Team Retro Craze, which is what got the whole stream team thing going, and yeah, less said about that the better.
mm-hmm. But yeah, just to like kind of inform others and actually me because I'm not sure what goes on behind the scenes, but like what is being part of like the staff of that entail?
There's a number of things. Initially, we had to do this was way back when. It's been almost as long ago since the last relay, so 2017. Back then, staff members had to commit to at least one weekly stream where we just kind of just showcase retro content because that was just what we were doing at the time. By the following year, 2018, is when we hosted Retroton for the first time, and that's just kind of done as a love letter to all things retro. Like it's not a charity event. We just run a week long online marathon just to be able to showcase retro runs, and we want everybody of like all retro runs of all kinds. We've had like old Magnavox Odyssey runs on that thing for crying out loud.
Really?
Just to really stretch like yeah, this is what we're looking for kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
After that, the weekly commitments to streams kind of faded away once we started focusing more on things like marathons. We do one night only tournaments, both in the standard fashion as well as the knockout fashion. Knockout is like one person every round is eliminated until it gets down to one person, and etc. I'm trying to think of what else we've done. We still host some weekly stuff. There's Retro Night on Monday. Console Chords, which is started by one of our staff members, Colin Cakes, which is like name that tune, but for video game music, which I think is a wonderful idea. And there's a number of other things I got with that. But as far as like being staff, essentially what that means these days is we're expected to be able to uphold all things with the channel in terms of being able to provide content when necessary. Like if we have a gap fill in, we're always the first ones that get reached out to be able to fill gaps. Like say if runner has to drop out last minute or something like that. We're responsible for making sure that runs during these events get what's called restreamed to the channel, where people like, because we don't actually stream people from their own streams. They have to stream to our own like private server, and we pick it up from that, and we do that in shifts. So that's another part of it as well. We have our own staff only events like RG Love, which is held the week of Valentine's Day, where we just play like, we don't necessarily play games we speedrun, we just play all the games we love. This year I played the Konami trilogy. I played TMNT and Simpsons and X-Men all on a block. Yeah. Just to name one thing I would have done. I remember in 2020 I ran something like 20 games that week. I don't know how the hell I did that, but I just moved into the condo I'm in now with this messy stream room, and I was just like, I just want to play video games now because I got moved in and I'm good to go. And yeah, so I was just like, here's a bunch of games. So that's just another thing we do around here. And other than that, it's just upholding the integrity of retro, and that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
like as speedruns move more and more into like more modern stuff, and I love modern speedruns, everything from Celeste to like Super Mario Wonder, Odyssey, Breath of the Wild. Like I have nothing against those runs, but like we're trying to uphold the integrity of like the games that got us where we are, you know. So
yeah, I'm a huge retro enthusiast myself. I'm super interested specifically in like the history of how video games have evolved over the years. So I like all sorts of things, but I've always been more interested in like the retro side of things. So
yeah, and there's so many things about that amaze me to this day, especially like storage space for games. For example, so my nephew just turned 11, right? And for Christmas, I had a spare NES, so I gifted that to him, and I had a spare EverDrive N8. Whole library on there, maybe a few hacks as well. So I just gifted that to him. He loves retro. Like I remember we went to this convention, and he was playing, of all games, he was playing Donkey Kong 3, as in like the one with the spray.
Yeah, that's like a choice.
He loved it. I was just like, that's cool. Like we'll play the heck out of that. That's fine. We'll do this. Played a little bit of Dig Dug, but that was his thing. Like that's what he wanted to do. So I was just like, I'm just going to play whatever he wants, and I'm going to set him up with this. And I remember that's like, so I've had at one point like 3 NES flashcards. I have my EverDrive for the Famicom, which I use on my my AV. I had the EverDrive N8, which my nephew now has, and I still have a power pack. And it still amazed me to think like these games now can be compressed so much that they fit on just like an SD card. Because at the time they're like 8 megs, which today is like nothing in size, but that's still like a fully functioning game, you know?
Yeah,
that's the kind of stuff that fascinates me.
Yeah, I remember like the first SD card I used, and I like put, you know, maybe like the full American NES library on it or something.
Right.
And I used an old SD card that I used to have in my Wii, and it was like 4 gigabytes. You know, so you know it's this pathetic SD card in modern standards, but it's holding the entire library of a gaming console.
That's all you need. It was the same thing with if I used to run an NES emulator, I used to put it on a flash drive. I wouldn't have a full library, but like here's like the 10 games I want to play. I can put it on this, you know, 2 gig flash drive or whatever. It fits. So
yeah, that kind of stuff is super interesting. Just their limitations. I love the joke I see sometimes that I think is a good example where it's like an image of Super Mario Brothers, and they say like the file, the size of the image file and then like how that compares to the actual game file size, and it's like magnitudes larger.
For sure.
Just
not even counting for like processing power and things like that, but yeah, for sure, it's interesting.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, there's just something super interesting about like gaming with the limitations of yesteryear, I guess. Like that's the music that interests me because it's not just like full orchestra or what normal music. It's like they had to make beeps and boops sound good. There's something about that.
Oh, it's the best, and of course some devs really stretch it. Like Sunsoft NES, like I don't know how those dudes got what they got out of that chipset, but I'm glad they did. It's very much a time capsule. Anybody who's ever played NES is always going to appreciate it for all the reasons they should and more. And I think that's one of the best things about it. Like, what is there to not appreciate about this little box that kept us entertained for seems like decades now? Like, it's not like any console that came before where it's like it's a bit more of a to me stuff like older Atari titles are like it's not that the games are bad, it's just that the hardware is a bit more difficult to like that's what I'm looking for utilize. like how you put it on like just any number of TVs. Whereas like in NES, like you have a lot of variety for that. You can run it through an old front toaster, AV Famicom if you're willing to spend the money, which I was. Best decision I ever made for NES gaming, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah,
like nothing did what it did and has gotten to the point where it is now. Like it's one of the best consoles ever, and it deserves that.
Yeah, and getting back to like the RGL, another like common event I see is on March 10th doing a whole like Mario weekend.
Yeah, do the Mario. Yeah, for I remember I actually ran a game for that for the first time this year. I ran a Yoshi Safari, which is a Super Scope game.
Yeah,
I used to speed run it years back, and the game is interesting because you get to see Koopalings and Bowser and stuff that you just never see anywhere else. Like, why is Bowser wearing a giant suit of armor? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And it's like, all right, so Bowser's kaiju, cool, good to know. But there it is. You know, Nintendo had the brass to do that. They just put it on a game that no one was ever going to play except me. So,
yeah, I usually do stuff for that. I know this one they did some. They will try to do something interesting where like it was a knockout tournament, but yeah, I'm surprised not more people signed up for that. But you know,
yeah, me too.
I made it. I made it there, so you know it's all good.
Heck yeah. I remember I saw you on the sign up list. It's also cool in that, so to shout out one of my teammates, you also get to see some really cool Mario stuff in addition to Yoshi Safari that like some people just forget existed. Like I know my teammate Colin Cakes used to run the NES version of Mario's Time Machine, which is an educational game, but it has a speed run. So
oh yeah, of course it does.
That's another game that can just like here we can slot this in, you know.
Yep. Yeah, there's obscure things that you wouldn't see anywhere else for sure.
Yeah, and because during that time period, Mario's face was in so many places people didn't expect. Like it was just all over places. Like people forget about Wrecking Crew. Like let's play Wrecking Crew. Probably not many people, but Mario's in it, so
that's him.
Fair enough.
Yeah, he sure was everywhere. Still is, but not to the same interesting extent, I guess, because back then they wanted him everywhere. It's not like he just was everywhere.
Right.
They like tried to force it upon you. Like here he is in Punch Out. Here he is in Tennis. Here he is in Wrecking Crew.
He is the referee. Yeah, you're right about that. And to these days, the only like outside the box stuff I see for that character specifically is maybe like the Raving Rabbids stuff, which is still cool, but like
yeah,
it definitely stretches a bit further than something like Mario Kart because Mario Kart's been around forever. Like we know what to expect. It's gameplay that evolves, but it's still the same basic thing. But seeing something like Raving Rabbids as like a crossover, it's just like okay, neat. Yeah. And of course there's Smash Brothers, but that's his whole. We don't need to get into that. That's his whole separate category.
Oh yeah. So to bring up other events, and you mentioned it earlier, but just recently you did the Grand Pooh Bear thing, that little his speedrun tour, yeah. So yeah, how was that experience?
Everything around the event was amazing. Like I had to give all the props to Pooh. Of course, I've known who Pooh is for years, but he and I never really had a chance to like really interact. And he reached out to me at the recommendation of somebody else, and that's how I got recruited for it and brought up to Boston. And it was everything about the event itself was a great time. I never thought I'd get to be a part of something like that, and getting to meet runners of games that I would have just never considered myself to be like on that level of was also really cool. Getting to meet runners of like Odyssey and the Switch Zelda games and stuff like that, and of course see Pooh do what he does. Not on stage, but just like a few feet from me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had been wanting to do it for a while, but I never wanted to reach out. Like I'm the kind of person who like if something happens, it'll happen organically, and that's what's kind of been the case with most of my speedrun hobby. Like I've never really reached out to anybody to do anything. Say, hey, can I be a part of this? Like unless I'm submitting runs for something, that's a whole different thing. But I don't like be direct about something. I want them to find me. That's what happened with RGL. That's what happened with Grand Pooh Bear speedrun sessions. And yeah, the event was great. It was I gotta give props to him for one other thing in particular. Watching him interact with his fans is top notch. Like he's amazing. He deserves the status that he has. He's so good with the people that know who he is and want to watch him. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm bad at like promoting myself, I guess, if I want to, be
Right.
a part of something too. So I totally get that personally. Um,
Mm,
uh, oh yeah, I was gonna say I watched that event, of course, and I remember
mm,
when they showed the camera at you when you would do stuff. You did
mm.
like this absurd skip in a game right when
Yeah,
the camera was there.
he panned it over to me just in time for me to do the stage 2 skip in TMNT, which anyone who's seen me run that game twice in GDQ now has knows what it's about,
Mm.
but that doesn't mean his audience knows about it. So he panned it over to me. He never seen it before, and he was just like, "Wow, that cutscene switch over was perfect. Like, how did you have that on there?" I was like, "I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, you panned it over to me at the right time, and here we are." I got to show him some games he'd never seen before. He never seen Ninja Baseball Batman. That game's amazing for anybody that hasn't heard of it, and he was just like, "What am I watching here? It's the most Japanese thing you'll ever watch in your life." So
Mm.
here you go. It's on your stream. And of
So
course, like some of my heavy hits, Simpsons, X-Men, etc.
of course, but yeah, you were playing on like a machine that just had like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things on it.
Yeah.
Was that just there? Or...
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Oh.
it was at the actually the arcade. It's there are probably like actual name for it. I call it the emulation station.
Ah.
It's just a big like emulator inside a box inside a big arcade cabinet.
Hmm. That makes
So
sense.
the idea is you just are able to put a lot of games in there, and that's kind of what they just let me do. It's like, well, you're not focused on anything specifically, just play what you want, and we'll switch back over at any given point. And the stars aligned for the skip. Like he was so happy about that. He discussed that specifically with me about after the event was over. Just like, I can't believe we switched over to you in time to see that skip. I was like, I was hoping for it. I kept resetting that game just to make sure I could show that off, even if I wasn't gonna be able to show a finished run of it.
Hmm. Yeah. So were you? Because obviously the camera wasn't on you at all times, but
Mm-hmm.
were you like playing arcade games the whole time?
I was on that machine the whole time. That machine was
Oh.
off limits to anybody else.
Oh.
It was. I remember after the event, I was saying that like I was the strongest person in that room because they got to sit down for their runs. I was standing up for 3.5 hours,
Hmm.
so I got to make fun of that. But it was still a great experience. I very much enjoyed being a part of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of work for not a lot of
Mm.
screen time in comparison, but.
Yeah, and that was an interesting aspect because I didn't really know what to expect going in, but
Hmm.
he knew it was up, and that's all that mattered to me. I just had to make sure I was going to be gaming wise in the right place at the right time, and in most cases, I did. The
Hmm.
first big event there was so he's a huge fan of the game. So everybody who knows Pooh knows he's a huge pro wrestling fan. He loves the game WWF WrestleFest, which is one of my favorite wrestling games at arcades growing up, and one of the first instances where he panned the camera over to me, I had just finished Once He's Seen the Royal Rumble mode, which is something that he'd been wanting to do on his stream for a while, and I got to do it for his audience. I was like, heck yeah, that was sick.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was
But yeah.
pretty cool. I was also surprised I got it. That run is incredibly random.
Hmm.
It's a sub 3 run, so like a sub 3 arcade run, like that's not consistent. It's never going to be consistent. You have to rely on a lot of things to go your way.
Hmm. But yeah, what I liked about watching
Worked
that
out.
is it was unique because
Mhm.
you know usually it just has the different runs, but no, just switching to like just arcade gameplay.
Mhm.
I
Because
haven't
it had to
seen
be
that
taking
before.
place in an
So.
arcade.
Mhm.
It felt different to be a part of it. And I was like, I'm not used to this, but he knows what's up and he's the sponsor, so I'm gonna let it pan out. I trust him. There was no reason not to trust him. It was his baby. He's been doing speedrun sessions for what, five,
Mhm.
6 years now? It's been a while. So
And yeah, before pandemic at least. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
I've been to two of them, so I
Nice.
get the gist. One of them just was where GDQ was, so that was easy. But yeah,
Mm.
one lined up very nicely with some trip that was already happening, so it worked out. But
Nice. And I think he's trying to do that going forward. Like he wants them to line up with certain events. Like this one didn't take place at PAX East, but it was in the same city at the same time.
yeah.
And that was not the first time he hosted it at Boston during PAX weekend. So it was
Hmm.
just a repeat, but he wanted something different. Someone told him they wanted an arcade runner, and someone recommended me to him, and rest is history.
Makes sense. There
Worked
you
out.
are. Yeah. What else? Well, you know about yourself better than I would, so.
Mm.
Yeah.
LRock617, all handles, all social media.
Oh well. Okay.
I'm not trying to push anything. I'm just you said I know myself better than and I just threw that out there. So
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I want to say there.
those links will be
Mm.
easily accessible, so don't worry. YouTube description
Fair
and
enough.
on stream at all times. So Important
There's
information.
I don't think there's really much else to discuss. I haven't been pushing arcade stuff on my stream recently. Most of the stuff I've been doing has been like revisiting old runs to make sure they can be like marathon ready, because now that things are in person again, I want to make sure things are on the up and up. I have my time with it, and I'm not saying I'm not going to come back to it. It's just that it's going to be less of my focus. But I definitely want to see if I can get to at least 300. I'm at 241 now, and there are colleagues of mine that have 600 and 700 apiece. So the titles are out there to definitely do it. It's just going to require the drive and the motivation to be like, hey, I want to play this game, because that's where a lot of it comes from. I'll put like a week of grind time into a game, and I'll be like, oh, this looks more fun. I'm going to play this, and then I play that instead. So I've had a lot of games dropped off for that reason. Such as the magic of MAME, there's tons of stuff to go through, so you never know what's going to be around the corner.
So yeah, as you were saying, you went from speedrunning to like the 1 credit clears and kind of speedrunning again.
There and back.
There and back.
And a lot of my speedruns, some exceptions, still push 1cc as the primary focus. For example, my TMNT run at AGDQ, that time was not good. It was like an 18 something, and my PB is like a 14. To tell you something, but as you can probably tell, my primary goal is survival, and especially in that last stage, that game like really put me through the ringer. So I had to sacrifice time to make sure I could show off the skill, and that's going to be my primary focus for stuff like that. Now, there are some runs where that's the exception, not the rule. Simpsons Arcade, for example, that's very much a speed run to me. Like, you can't speed run it without 1cc'ing it, essentially. Like, you can speed run it, but to have like a top time, like a sub 16, like you're probably not sniffing a sub 16 without a 1cc, or at least or maybe even a deathless. But that just came with the process. It's not like TMNT where you can take a death to alter rank. Simpsons is just the same beginning to end, and there's no I win button. There's just
I win button.
Skillful gameplay.
Yeah, that was something I was gonna ask. Was like, what was the overlap between like speedrunning an arcade game and 1cc'ing it? Because I assume you kind of have to 1cc it if you're speedrunning it, but maybe not. I don't know the strats.
It really depends. There are some games that push 80% as credit feeding. I don't personally agree with those, but nothing I say is going to change that kind of stuff. That said, those exist, and with those, they essentially like are pushing. Well, to use 2 examples, TMNT features multiple instances of death abuse to drop the internal difficulty, so you have less enemies to fight. Pretty normal thing to be able to do in that game. And in X-Men, you have the mutant power button, which, as I mentioned before, I've joked to call it I win button. But in that game, for the 80% credit feed run, you just wipe whole screens of enemies with that, get yourself killed, and then do it again, because this is the fastest way to play through the game. That's just not how I prefer to play.
Yeah, I see.
That's why I like
it's definitely an
most of the
basis.
3. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because not every arcade game is created equal in that way. Not every arcade game has rank. Some just play the same beginning to end, regardless of how many deaths you take and how many quarters you spent. And that's why I think Simpsons is like a great middle ground there, because there's no rank abuse. Like the internal difficulty is always going to be the same regardless of how well you're doing, and there's no button you can press to just clear the screen and take a death to get it all back. You actually have to play the game.
I see. So have you done runs that aren't beat 'em ups or arcade games?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier I did Yoshi's Safari for Mario.
Oh yeah,
Mario.
I guess other than that,
there haven't been many. I've messed with some more popular NES runs. Like I used to speedrun DuckTales just for funsies on NES. My time isn't great. It's like a 732, I think is my PB. There was a time, to borrow more Disney, there was a time when I had the world record in Mickey Safari and Letterland to really drive home the kind of games I'm willing to play. I know that sounds so jank and weird, but we kind of dissected that game. Author Blues and I actually spent a decent amount of time like trying to understand that game. To set the story, back in 2018 is when I first discovered the game existed. It was part of RGL's Discathlon that year. I didn't participate in the event, but I really took to that run a couple others. I really enjoyed Little Mermaid. I played that for a little bit. I did runs of that. I think I got like a 715, which is as a time. That's when I picked up on DuckTales. That was the first time I played Chip and Dale's a speedrun. Not for me. Chip and Dale's, like, it's a great NES speedrun. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
That said, Safari Letterland was interesting because it's a very basic educational game, but it actually has an interesting speed run because the platforming in that game is kind of precise. Like there are certain spots you just can't land in on screen because it actually drains the time that you can move again. So like if you land on a rough spot like on a corner, it like does this thing where Mickey flips and that costs time. So you want to like have more precision in your jumps. So that's the run. And then later we discovered that, so after each stage, you have to choose from a list of the 26 letters of the alphabet. And it's a random one that comes up. Or so we thought. I don't remember if it was me that discovered it or Author Blues discovered it, but I remember we discovered that there's a frame rule to getting the optimized letter pattern. We're just like, how deep are we willing to take this game? Like, why does this educational game have frame rules? This is mind-boggling. Like, really? Like, really, really? And during that time period, he and I started trying to put like even more time into it because there was someone who bought my time, which I don't mind losing my world record, but the person played it on a smartphone, which in a game that has you menuing is kind of frowned upon because you know touchscreen is like it's a little much. So that ended up getting ousted at one point. I still have the third best time. JKL I think has the top time now, and he's an amazing runner of the game. So, but yeah, I spent a bit of time with that one. It's probably the deepest I ever went. Actually, no, he's in second place. I did not know Omar beat him out. For a certain pocket of time, that was a platformer that I just kind of went in on, which it seems incredibly weird, but it's a short run. I enjoyed playing it, and what more do you need? Yeah. Much like a large portion of the NES community, I also did runs of Strider. I got my sub 4, and I was happy with it.
I've heard about that, but don't know much about it.
It's great. It's a run that I still will like turn my NES on and just show people. Like it's never gonna have the fame of a game like Mega Man 2, but yeah, it has zips that anybody can do. So it's a fun run to just like learn. And I can't sub for it anymore. Like my best times these days are like 410 to 412, but I still show it off for people. Outside of that, though, yeah, primarily beat 'em ups, arcade, fighting games, things like that.
Yeah,
just what I enjoy.
No, yeah, I understand that. I was just curious what else there was, because I know there's plenty of that. That's for sure.
For sure.
But yeah.
I also did. I used to do runs of Resident Evil 2 as well, the classic version, but never got good at that. It's what it is. That game is also incredibly optimized, but I've never been good at menuing, so I just like dirtled around with it, learned some strats to see how far I could get. Not a great time. I'm at like 279th out of probably 280. So
not last though.
But I enjoy my time with it. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. It's a good speed run. Just a very different cut of the cloth for sure. Like tank movement in general is an anomaly, and then the menuing of it is like there's carcinogen people are better than him, and then there's everybody else after that, you know. So
yeah, tank movement. I believe you mean jank movement.
I still tell people all the time that of all retro game mechanics, that one is gonna age the worst. Like there just aren't games that are made with that anymore. There's just no reason to have them. You know? Yeah. They were designed for the reason of it, the fact that it was supposed to be scarier to have that kind of limited movement, but it doesn't play well. I can play it because I'm used to it. I played the heck out of the game as a teenager, but yeah, it's gonna age like milk for sure.
Yeah. So I guess any future plans that you know of?
Open to attend SGDQ. Past that, not sure. Retrothon, of course, is in a couple weeks. I only have one game in the event. I'm running Simpsons Arcade on Saturday the 27th. And of course, I'll be part of the staff stuff during that week. But should be a good week. And then past that, let's see, there's that. GDQ is in June, early July. Past that, the world's my oyster. I'm not sure what's going on beyond SGDQ. I just want to make sure I can get to that and see what happens after. Hopefully AGDQ next year. Can't see a reason not to go back, especially if it's in Pittsburgh. I've fallen in love with that city. I've been twice in the last year, including AGDQ 2024, and really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, it's a good area. It's just cold at that time.
So here's the thing. I'm a little bit further south than Pittsburgh, PA was during that time. It was the same temperature there. that part of the country, that eastern part of the Midwest just got hit with like a really bad cold front. That's not going to happen every year because the week before that, everything was like average. Like it was like a fall week or whatever. But yeah, once HDQ rolled around, it's like, yeah, y'all picked the worst week to do this in hindsight, but that's not anybody's fault. Like you can't predict weather. It just showed up as like, here's a bunch of ice. Like it's not always going to feel like that. It's not like Boston, which is still like 28 degrees in March or whatever, you know. So
yeah, I was gonna say though, like I don't think there was a single time it was above freezing. It was just
no, it was disgusting.
Oh
It was probably high teens most of the week, and I was driving to the event every day. So imagine how I felt. I was like, cool, there's snow everywhere. I feel safe.
Yeah, no, yeah, that was a time. Yeah, the first couple nights I stayed with someone before staying at the hotel, so yeah, I definitely get the traveling being awkward.
It was my first time attending a GDQ of the, how many times has it been now? 7. That was my 9th GDQ I've attended, I think. Actually, more than that. 6, 7. No, it was 9. I was right. It was, out of the 9 times I've attended, it's the only time I've ever not stayed at the hotel. So learning what that was like was an experience. It was definitely pros and cons. Like I'm not gonna say like I'll never do that again. I probably would, but some of those things wouldn't be cons if it had not been that week where it was 15 degrees and freezing the whole time. So
oh yeah,
that's not Pittsburgh's fault.
It was an experience for sure.
For sure.
I'm trying to remember. I know AGDQ 2019 had that snowstorm, but the rest of the week I think was okay.
Yeah, it was really cold most of the week. I remember we walked one night that week. We must have walked like a mile and a half just to go to like Five Guys or something. I was like, why are we walking this far? It's like 22 degrees out here, but whatever. We did it. That event is more infamous for the hotel itself, which had the blinking hallway.
Oh, the murder hallway, my favorite.
Yep. Yeah. Of course. Synonymous.
Oh yeah. Everyone there knows and will never forget. It was an experience.
I'm just glad that everybody knows about that name. I was just gonna refer to some generic, but like, hey, murder hallway works. That's what I've always called it. I was just like, I don't know. So
I mean that's what it's called. It's the murder hallway. Which is funny because otherwise I think that venue was so nice.
Yeah. So the venue itself was fine. I know the staff was not real thrilled with us by the time the event was over. It was their first time hosting a GDQ, and I think they were just completely over speedrunners acting up, especially getting drunk and stuff. So, but that's just my take. Overall, though, I think as far as the venue itself and in terms of like items that were nearby, because I'm really big on like having good like food options near a GDQ event. That one had that in spades. Like it had so many good like walkable options, just like GDQ this year. Of course, it was 15 degrees outside. No one wanted to walk anywhere, but the options were there. So
oh yeah, they had that nice market nearby. But yeah, I just remember like I think all venues have been pretty good, but that one just was like nice. All of the rooms downstairs, and it all seemed pretty pristine. I don't know. I liked it. It was nice for the
downstairs rooms. Yeah.
That was my first AGDQ, so
it was my
remember it well.
Third. It was the first one in 5 years that hadn't been hosted at the same venue, the Herndon Hotel, which
I've never been there. So
I've been for 2 GDQ events and once for a different event that was hosted by Speed Gaming. It's a time-honored GDQ hallmark location for sure, but 2 problems. One, it outgrew it. Like it just got to too many people where the hotels couldn't accommodate anymore. And 2, the one thing I did not like about the venue, because everything else about it was stellar, nothing good within walking distance. Like the hotel was essentially an island. Like you actually had to like walk around like whole blocks of stuff to even get anywhere. Like there was some decent stuff, quote unquote, nearby. Like there was a Popeyes nearby, but you actually had to walk there. The trade-off there was they had a lot of food trucks.
Oh.
They were pretty good. So
yeah. For the Speed Gaming thing, is that Speed Gaming Live?
Yeah, I attended that in October 2019.
Yeah, what's that like? I haven't heard a lot about that.
It was so essentially the event is kind of separated into 2. The primary attraction for Speed Gaming Live is that they host tournaments for a variety of games, most of it randomizers. So like you see like LTTP Rando, there were Mario Maker tournaments.
Mm.
God, it's been so long. I can't remember what else they hosted. Those two stood out the most. But aside from that, that was the primary attraction because there was like actual prizes for that. Like I'd never really seen anything in terms of speedrunning where people were actually like competing for something. So it's like, I mean, hey, if you want to make money out of this, there's your option. The
Yeah.
other thing which we got to do was in the basement of the hotel, and they actually had a side stream set up for just as like a speedrun event. And that Saturday of the event, it's like essentially the entire day was committed to RGL. There were 8 staff members of RGL in attendance at that event, and we just got that whole day to ourselves, which is to like submit games, and we probably ran like between the 8 of us, we probably ran like 3 to 4 games apiece, and
Hmm.
so that was cool. It was really hot down there.
Mm.
Because it's a basement in a hotel, but it was unique. I would not have traded that experience for anything because we had never had that many team members all together all at once like that. Like the stars aligned for that one, so that was really cool.
Mm. Yeah, because I've heard people kind of go to speed gaming live, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't know a lot about it, like what the experience is like compared to the other speedrun events. Because
Mm-hmm.
I go to the Pace, which is the the GSA hosted thing. So that's like
Ah,
one of the smaller kind of events that I attend. But I'm sure Speed Gaming Live's kind of like that, but a lot different. It's its own kind of thing. So I wasn't sure what.
sure. I think that if you're gonna do any of the competitions, it's definitely worth looking into for the speedrun stuff. I'll be honest, we were kind of featured as special guests, so if you're not being featured in that way,
Mm,
then I don't know what it takes to be a part of that, to be
I
honest.
see.
So I couldn't tell you like I couldn't tell you what that's like, to be honest with you,
Okay.
because there were definitely non RGL members who were like doing stuff for that, like Conster, Mr. Cab, people like that, just actually doing runs for that, but like they're not RGL. So
I get it. Yeah, it's a separate organization kind of thing. So,
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
to me it felt like a smaller GDQ because I've been to a number of smaller events. Like I've been to like Buckeye Speed Bash, which is like just a smaller charity event that takes place in Ohio. Calithon, which was
Mhm.
wonderful. I'm kind of sad they have not been running that live again. But
Rest in
again,
peace. Yeah.
pandemic, yeah, pandemic did a number on that one. That's for sure. I've run a couple of their online events since then, so it's still alive and well for like the things they're pursuing. But it was my first time ever visiting California, and I'll never forget that. Like that was
Mm,
just amazing. So
that's cool.
so to me, it kind of felt like how those felt. It's just like, yeah, we're doing the same thing, but it's a smaller scale, and that's cool. Like you don't, not everything has to be like the grand wall that is GDQ. Like
No.
sometimes you can just hang out with like 1/10 or 1/20th of the number of people, and that's a lot more close knit. Yeah, so
Mhm. Yeah, for
definitely
sure.
appreciate that.
I do like the smaller events as well. That's why I like
Mhm.
learning about them at least, seeing what each one's like, even though there's no way in
For
hell I
sure.
can afford to go to everything. But
Tell me about it.
yeah,
Like I own my own
that's the
place
real
now.
struggle. Yeah.
Right, right. Prior to the pandemic, I was renting, and rent wasn't as expensive as it was now. Now I own. It's still just like, man, how many events can I go to? I
Hmm.
want to go to all of them, but realistically,
Yeah.
so
Boy, do I get that. Anyway, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, is there anything we didn't discuss that you'd like
Nothing
to?
that comes to mind. Retrothon later this month. Y'all tune in on Retro Gaming Live TV. Be sure to continue to tune into GDQs. You'll probably see me whether it's playing a game or on someone's couch. So I'm going to attend the events for as long as I'm going to be able to because I enjoy the environment. It feels great to see people you only get to see once every 6 months. Again, like there's just nothing like that feeling.
Hmm.
So I think that's a big part of the addiction of going to a GDQ. It's like I haven't seen you in so long, even though it's been 6 months, but it feels longer, you know. So because
Hmm.
you spend 8 days with a specific group of people, and then suddenly it's gone. Like it feels so much longer before you like get back to them because it feels like family for like that week, you know. So
Oh yeah, I get it.
I say I don't need to explain this to you.
Oh no.
Just, reciprocating it for your audience.
Oh yeah, I've praised in-person events numerous times for the exact same reasons. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah,
definitely a
there's
universal kind of thought.
there's nothing like it. You get to break bread with these people. You get to learn strats from these people, and there's nothing like doing that in real time.
Hmm.
It's one of a kind for sure.
Yeah, I always say like if you're a speedrunner, you got to go to an event like GDQ at least once. Like
Oh yeah,
you just
yeah,
have to experience that.
and expect to keep going back.
Well, yeah, if you go once, it's like, well, now
Right.
you've been successfully pulled into the addiction. Now you're
Yeah.
trapped. Deal with it.
You have been indoctrined. Congratulations. We'll see you again every single time for the next decade or so.
Guilty as charged. My bank
Mm.
account is very sad. Anyway,
Yeah.
um,
No regrets. I've
no
enjoyed every
regrets.
GDQ I've attended. So.
Yeah, I don't regret it. I might
Mm.
regret it someday though when I'm on the streets, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Still have
Once
an NES controller in your hand, just chilling in
we'll
the
we'll cross
streets.
that bridge when I need to live under it. Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I like it.
Anyway, yeah. If you feel content with our discussion here, we can wrap it up and you can self promote to your liking.
Sounds good to me. If you want to find me on any socials, whether it be X or Twitch, be sure, or I think even on Instagram is where I'm at. I don't use it ever, but it's LRock617 is where you can find me. And yeah, just peep in for the content. When I go stream again, that's where you'll see me.
Fair enough. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Every Sunday we try, at least. Uh, so stay tuned. We like the Sunday commentary on the YouTube. Yeah,
Mhm.
watching live, watch
On
YouTube,
YouTube.
watching YouTube, watch live. That's all I really got.
Circle of life.
Truly, truly
That's how it
is.
goes.
But yeah, I guess that's all. So yeah, just take care, everyone. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. All right.
Thanks, Ace.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you coming on. All right. Have a good one,
Mhm.
everyone. Thanks.